Good evening, my name is Arlene Herson. The name of the show is Getting to Know You, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Tonight we're going to get to know a man whose talents and abilities shine like a brilliant diamond. And like a diamond, he is multifaceted. He is a movie star, singer, writer, actor, and producer. Audiences around the world treasure his performances on stage, screen, and television. He is Harry Belafonte, and let's get to know him. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted that you can be on my show, but I was surprised to learn, actually, you're so well known as a singer. Yet, in learning about you and doing research about you, I found out that originally you wanted to be an actor, that you became a singer by accident.
I was a student of the drama for almost 7 years. My interest started at the age of 18, right, having just come back from the Second World War. I had inadvertently found myself in the middle of theater people. I found that there was a purpose in life that expressed itself out of that community that appealed to me. I studied with a leading German director. As a matter of fact, his name was Ernst Piscata. He was a German Jew, had come to this country as a political exile, had gotten his charter to teach from the State University of New York, and it was a drama. It's called the Dramatic Workshop, New School of Social Research. To get into his school was indeed a feat. And my classmates were people like Marlon Brando, Walter Matthau, Tony Curtis, Tony Franciosa, B. Arthur. They were like who's who in show business.
My goodness.
Rod Steiger. And after having studied Gorky, Luigi Pirandello, studying Moliere and Shakespeare, I then went into the world seeking my way as an artist with portfolio, an actor, and there was just no work for me. There was no work around for black actors at all in that period, and I inadvertently fell into singing, which in the beginning was just a means to an end. It paid the rent. And then all of a sudden it caught on, and I found myself all of a sudden one morning a singer.
Yeah, okay, and you've stayed a singer and an actor and a producer, a lot of things, but you make it seem so innocent, it's so easy, actually, and so innocent when you say inadvertently it all happened to you. I mean, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't even the fact of your, when you say finding out about being an actor, becoming involved in an actor's workshop. That was an accident. That was something that happened to you because of a job that you had had. I mean, that's way back.
I was a janitor's assistant, and I worked in an apartment building, and I had repaired a Venetian blind in one of the apartments. And I was given as a gratuity 2 tickets to a theater. The theater was the American Negro Theater, located in Harlem, and they had a play going on called Home is the Hunter. I went to see this play, and it was there that I discovered the magic, a sense of purpose. I saw all of these young black people on stage, possessed of great energy, saying things that to me were quite magical. And what a way in which to spend one's life, standing on a stage, making believe. But it wasn't just making believe, it's what they were making believe about. Because the play addressed itself to fairly serious issues. And the seriousness of it and the way it imparted itself to the audiences was a wholly new experience for me. And I felt that within that context, that here was something that I really wanted to be a part of. A community of thinking people who wanted to get across ideas that would help fulfill our purpose for being here on earth. I think the whole idea of the theater was to me quite an astounding revelation.
Yeah, okay. Well, particularly I would think at that point in your life, because you mentioned you were working as a janitor. Somebody gave you a tip. They gave you 2 tickets. They didn't realize what a big tip they gave you. But just to backtrack even more, because you're such a success. And the thing is, I think that most people think that people who are successful and you make a lot of money have always been that way, and that it came easy for you. And here's Harry Belafonte, and he can do anything and go any place that he wants to. And that's true today. But it wasn't true then. So I want to bring you back. You were born in Harlem, I understand.
Yes, born in Harlem.
Okay, then moved to the West Indies when you were about 8, I think, and then back to Harlem.
I was 5.
5?
Yes.
Okay. Where was really home to you? Where did you feel more comfortable? In New York, in Harlem, or in the West Indies?
As a matter of fact, up until I was about 15 or 16 years old, I felt quite rootless. I was born in Harlem. At the age of a year and a half, I went back to the West Indies. I went to the West Indies. My mother was from there. My father was from the West Indies as well. I came back to the United States at the age of 3. Then I went back to the West Indies at the age of 5. I stayed in the West Indies in Jamaica until I was 12. I came back in 1939. I'm now 57 years old, in case people are trying to figure out. Anyway, while I was in Jamaica, I felt very much the American, and when I came back to the United States, I felt very much the Jamaican, because those cultural changes, those experiences, hit upon me at a time when I was what they call the formative years of life. Those are the times when children begin to make lasting and very fundamental impressions. Things stick to you. You begin to mold your personality. You begin to mold your tastes. And here I was, fairly rootless, because while I was in Jamaica, I lived from one family to another. Within the years that I was there, I must have lived with at least 6 or 7 different families. Economic pressure, the kind of a nomadic existence that the people in that community had. As a consequence, I never grew up with any childhood friends. I mean, I was never in a community long enough to make friends that I would later on in life be able to call upon. When I came back to the United States in 1939, my mother, who was a domestic worker, continued that kind of experience because she followed work. We sometimes lived in Harlem, we sometimes lived in Spanish Harlem, we sometimes lived in Washington Heights. We manipulated information that would give us an opportunity to survive as easily as possible. When it was necessary, my mother passed for Spanish rather than black, because in those days, racial lines were drawn on such peculiar levels that if you were Spanish, you were considered white. And if you were not Spanish and of color, you were considered black, or Negro, as they said then. So that there was a whole kind of a nomadic experience in my youth. And it wasn't until I enlisted at the age of 17 to be in the United States Navy that I began to have a kind of a continuity in daily experiences that led to the establishment of my first so-called set of friends.
That's interesting. So the Navy was a big turning point in your life. We're going to take a break because I want to talk about that turning point when we come back. Okay. We'll be right back. We're speaking with Harry Belafonte, my very special guest, and we're here at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. We'll be right back after these messages, so please stay right there.
Janine woke up in a cold sweat with one thing echoing through her brain. Who was this guy in her bathroom?
Meanwhile, Barry was thinking, whose bathroom am I in?
Janine remembered going to the party the night before and getting smashed out of her mind.
Barry remembered getting drunk and acting really stupid.
Eventually.
The whole evening came back.
Oh, I must be really stupid.
I must be really dumb.
What did I do? How did I get myself into this?
Well, what did I do? How did I get myself into this?
What about AIDS? Then they both realized, much to their relief, that unlike the rest of us,
They were just cartoons.
get high,
Get stupid.
get AIDS.
Your first time as a junior achievement elementary school volunteer can be a little scary. Can you get kids that young to think about their futures? Call us about volunteering, and you'll see. We'll supply you with training for this new program, and the kids will supply plenty of motivation.
We're back with my very special guest, Harry Belafonte. We're here at the Golden Nugget, on the stage of the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. It's kind of nice to be on the stage with you. Although I must say, you are here, and just a little background, where you're performing at the Golden Nugget, I've heard that if people even want to see you, that they can't hear because you're sold out, that they would not let you off the stage last night, that your performances here on this very stage where I am privileged to be with you is an absolute sensation. Now, why, you know, I really was going to go back to your childhood, and I want to go back to your childhood, but since we're here, why don't we see more of Harry Belafonte on the stage?
I think that most people view the region in which they live sometimes as exclusive to what theater is in the world. In other words, if you don't happen to play New York for a few seasons, the assumption is that you have not played the theater. But I do play the theater quite a bit. I am very, very intensely involved in Europe. I play in England and all the Scandinavian countries, and Germany and France and Italy, etc., etc. I also go through Africa and certain parts of South America and Australia and Japan and Canada. When you have taken advantage of the opportunity to go to all of these places, the ability to be as constantly present to the audiences who want to see you, it's not easy to do. And I shy away from television because usually what's required of me is so mindless and so unrewarding that if I do have an opportunity to perform before a live audience somewhere in the world, I'd rather take that option than to be seen doing some meaningless thing on television.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're here on television. This is not meaningless.
No, I exempt talk shows and interviews.
Good,
I'm talking about the sitcoms and the daily diet that people are fed in what they call entertainment television.
And you're in a very fortunate position in that you can do only what you want to do. You don't have to do anything these days just to make money.
No, I do have selection. That selection might appear to be much more than it is in reality. One does not perform in a film without going through an awful lot of compromises, especially if you are black. And I don't mean to lean on the issue, except that the issue does exist. Many times people think that perhaps I'm being a little bit too cryptic or a little bit too harsh in my criticisms and my statements about the problems that blacks face. Part of that perception is because we're so visible. I mean, certainly with Michael Jackson in the world and Lionel Richie in the world and Diana Ross in the world, and every Sunday people looking at literally hundreds of black players in sports, whether it's basketball. The impression is that blacks are doing really quite well. And I think that that is true only about a small segment of the black community. By and large, I think people would have to ask a much more in-depth question. Why don't we see more of James Earl Jones? Why don't we see more of Lou Gossett, who just won the Academy Award? Why don't we see more of Sidney Poitier as the actor? Why don't we see more of Cicely Tyson and Ruby Dee? And the point in that is that there's just not that much work available on a serious level, on a level that possesses the kind of artistic integrity that we would like to be identified with. It's just not there for us. Once in a while you get an exception, like A Soldier's Play, or Jane Pittman, or Sounder, films like that, or maybe Buck and the Preacher with Sidney Poitier and I did. But they're so few and far between that one would hardly have selected the theater as your living profession if that was the sum total of the amount of work that you were going to get to help you come across in your craft as you would like to be perceived. As a consequence, I'm more fortunate, I guess, than many of my colleagues because I can come to the Golden Nugget or go to Paris or Europe and perform.
True, okay, but you've also come a long way from the old days. We're going to take a break, and you've kind of mentioned the difficulties now, but as difficult as it is now, and I agree with you because the people you've mentioned are superb, it was 10 times more difficult 10 or 20 years ago when you were starting out. So let's take a break and then we can come back and talk about that. We're speaking with my very special guest, Harry Belafonte, and we'll be right back after these messages, so please stay right there.
So, whose influence are you under?
The air dances with the waters, which brings the rain that feeds the land, that is home to the animals. All life dances together.
In a world so connected, choosing one environmental cause can be hard. Earthshare is 40 environmental charities working together. You and your company can help by calling 1-800-MY-SHARE.
All life lives, or doesn't, together.
We're back with my guest, Harry Belafonte. We're here at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. We were talking before the break. You had mentioned how difficult it is for black actors to get the kind of work that you would like to get, the serious work. But let's go back, okay? 20 years ago, let's say, because it's not that long ago, but places like Miami Beach and Vegas, you're on the stage. You're a headliner. You're idolized on the stage. Off the stage, you have a problem. You can't stay in the hotel. You're not allowed in the casinos, perhaps. That was very, very difficult. How did you cope with that? How were you able to come on stage and perform when really you were being shunned off stage?
In very personal terms, yes, it was difficult, but the energy that permitted me to sustain was a goal that I'd set for myself, knowing that through the excellence of the performance, through the excellence of the art, through the things that I would be disseminating as information through my music, that I would be giving audiences a wholly different perception than the ones that they were required to have to reinforce those rather demeaning and discriminatory patterns in our society. And invariably, wherever I went, I found myself, the Waldorf Astoria, for instance, we broke down the barriers in the Hilton hotels. When I was in Las Vegas, first time into Thunderbird, we were not permitted to even live on the Strip or come through the front door or to eat in the main dining room. And I just felt that as long as I could prevail and force those conditions to reshape themselves and to rethink themselves, that I was making a contribution. And more often than not, I was rewarded with that kind of response. We toured on segregated institutions time and time again. I was able to say things on stage that were quite political at times. More often than not, the material was steeped in a great humanity that people could relate to. I was able to do much of what I did with a great aura of humor around much of it, so that people began to become comfortable with the presence of this black energy in their world, saying things that did not negate them, yet kept them in focus with what some of the issues were. And I think that to be able to use one's art and to use one's self that way is about as great a reward as you could ask for.
True, okay, fortunately, and I assume that made it easier with the kind of things you had to cope with off stage then, if you were able to express yourself that way and also be accepted, be the person who was able to break a lot of these barriers.
Yes, I understood the how to use the stage in order to get across certain ideas and feelings, but not to use it for political polemics. And then in my private life, I became very, very much involved in a lot of political and social issues, which helped me carry the process along even further.
Also in your private life, at one point, I understand you became disgusted with show business and decided this was not for you now, and you opened a restaurant in Greenwich Village called The Sage. Now, why The Sage?
Well, the name was picked by the literary mind in our group. I'm not quite sure whether he meant sage for the spice or sage for wisdom. Since our cooking was terrible, it certainly eliminated spice, and our judgment was so bad, it certainly didn't represent wisdom in opening it. But that had taken place in the earliest moments of my career. I was getting to be quite known as a pop singer, and that image disturbed me greatly. I found that the aura of being a pop singer, as it was interpreted in those days, meant that I was constantly singing material that was fairly mindless and not about very much. And I did not want that perception to pursue me through life. And the only way to make the shift and the change was to disengage completely, which I did. And I opened up a restaurant thinking that I could become independently, I could maintain my own independence, pay the rent, have a little pocket money, but that failed. And but while I was there, I had discovered folk music. I discovered Lead Belly and Josh White and Pete Seeger, and I found Woody Guthrie and songs of social consciousness that later on shaped the kind of life I was to have in the theater.
Well, I don't normally say this, but I'm glad that your business failed. I'm glad the restaurant business failed, because we would have missed a great deal not seeing Harry Belafonte as a performer. We're going to take a break, and we're going to talk some more when we come back. We're speaking with Harry Belafonte. We're here at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. We'll be right back after these messages.
When Raymond was 6, I was afraid to take him to the playground because they were doing drugs. When he was 10, I couldn't let him play ball in the schoolyard because of the gangs. When he was 15, I wouldn't let him go to any dances because there could be a fight or a shooting. Now he's a man, and I realize he's never been a kid.
Give your children back their childhood. Do something now. Call 1-800-WE-PREVENT. Together, we will take a bite out of crime.
Here's one time it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. Here's the other. Life's too short. Stop the hate.
We're back. We're with my guest, Harry Belafonte. We're here at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. You did make it as a success. Obviously, I don't have to say that because it's history. But in the beginning, when it did start to happen for you, and you had all this admiration, all these women, was that ever hard to handle? Because it happened quickly when it happened.
Yes, a lot about it was very difficult to cope with. I had absolutely no preparation, nor did I have any frame of reference for any of it. You have to understand that for many of us, the idea of becoming a success in show business and name up in lights on the marquee back in those days was not the objective at all. All I wanted was an opportunity to be able to perform, so I was quite willing to stay for the rest of my life in a small, wonderful nightclub down in Greenwich Village singing the songs that gave me delight, or doing occasional concerts here and there. I had no idea that it would ever turn into what it became. And when it did happen, I was just totally ill-prepared for it. I didn't do anything out of the way. I mean, it didn't make me arrogant or self-possessed, but I was very, very much aware of the pitfalls of such an onrush of affection and public focus. So I had to make certain hard-nosed rules for myself, and fortunately, because of my wife, we were able to direct our lives in a course that kept us in touch with everyday reality.
Okay, but that was your first wife, actually. At
Well,
those
both
times
wives
when
did that for
with
me.
both wives. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Even before we get into the wives, another thing I discovered was in the midst of all your success, you had a very serious eye injury, I understand, and
Yes.
that you had had when you were a child, aggravated by an accident, and you almost lost your eyesight. Is that a
Yes.
fact?
Yes, I was detached retinas, and I was going blind. And I had to have one operation every 3 months for a year. And 4 procedures. Now today, with today's technology, and they can use laser beams and do everything more swiftly. But in those days, we had to use gravity as a part of the procedure to pull the retina back into place so that surgery would be able to meet some measure of success. And I was very fortunate in the skillful hands of Dr. Ed Norton and the team at New York Hospital. Since then, I've been very much involved in working for the Fight for Sight and helping with a lot of institutions to do research in eyes and blindness. But it was an experience that brought a lot of sobriety into my life. It made me understand how precious much of what I'd taken for granted was. And I'm very fortunate that I'm here today to be able to see you and to see it all.
Right, because I know you came very close to losing your eyesight. Now, you mentioned before both wives, because I want to talk a little bit about the family. I know you've been married to your second wife, Julie, now for a long time. It's
28 years.
Yeah, so it's a long time. Your daughter, Shari, we don't see as much as you here in America as we want to, but we see your daughter, Shari, on hotel television commercials. Tell us about the rest of the family. You have 4 children, 2 from your first marriage, 2 from your marriage to Julie.
I have 4 children. Adrian is the oldest. She's 35. Shari, who is old enough. Now that she's in the public eye, I don't talk about
Right.
My son, David, who's 27, and my daughter, Gina, who's 23. They're all involved in the arts. I also have 2 grandchildren by my first daughter, Rachel and Brian. Rachel is 6 and Brian is 2 years old, and it's a very tightly knit group. I'm very fortunate with the way the kids have come off.
You are a family man very much. Now, your wife Julie is also very involved, a fashion designer. She owns a boutique, I understand. But were there any problems with an interracial marriage?
No, as a matter of fact, not as much as many people had assumed there would be. First of all, we got married because we fell in love, and we brought children into the world because that is how you consummate a love relationship in its highest form. We also lived our lives in a way that took us where we wanted to go. And as a consequence, with the coincidence of the civil rights movement and a more enlightened period in which we lived, the interracial aspects of our relationship was not that significant.
Yeah, right. Well, I tell you, when you say you went in an area you want to go, we're going to an area out there where I don't want to go now because we've come to an end of our show. But I thank you very much. I really appreciated you sharing with us, and I thank you for being a guest on my show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I hope that you have enjoyed getting to know Harry Belafonte. I know that I certainly have, and that you join us again next week. Meantime, good night. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.